Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Small Business Stories. You know me, the voice, Dr. LL. Loralyn here with you as your host, bringing you new guests every week talking about different angles of entrepreneurship and small business ownership. Today in the house, we've got Jim Martin. He is the founder of ACM Capital Partners, and he's got a story to share or two because he's all about finding ways to move people forward even if you think my finances are not that great, I'm not going to get anywhere. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
Well, when we started the little chit chat, pre-show, right? Like the pre-meeting, you were giving me some highlights that you are approaching almost 20 years with your business. Congratulations. That's a milestone very few hit.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's not it doesn't uh, s- uh, cover my career. I mean, I've been doing this type of work for many, many years. And I was hired back in the day by private equity firms and high net worth individuals to help them get out of tough situations or go into companies that they didn't quite understand, figure it out and try to come up with a long term solution or play for the business. And so I've been doing this type of work for about 35 years, so for quite a time. Yeah.
Doesn't it get scary when you think back and go, yeah, I started work, I graduated in da-da, and then
Oh
you're
no.
like, ooh,
It
the math, it's not years anymore, it's
it
decades.
is. It is. It does. It does get scary, but yet, when you think about the one's path and the various challenges that one has had, it's really great to be able to share that, right? Because you have so many stories, and it spans industries and continents and situational issues. So yeah, it's been a fun ride.
Indeed. And as someone who is also seasoned, I like to focus on that expertise. And this is a big part of the reason why we bring this podcast to people. So you can listen and learn from those of us that have walked through it, gone through it, fell apart during it, all the rest of that stuff. That's not to say that I don't have young entrepreneurs on. I do from time to time because they have a fresh perspective on things. And I think everybody needs to be heard because everybody knows something. And so, with that, even just before we get into all of this and how people can dig out in some of the stories, I thought just the naming of your company was a nice little story because I always ask, like, well, where did that name come from?
Mm. Yes. So as I said, I've been doing restructuring work, recapitalization of balance sheets, et cetera, really for since about 1990. I started my career in banking, and then in 1990, I followed one of the bankers that I worked for into a new venture, and they had acquired a subsidiary that he didn't understand. And so he threw me to the wolves and said, "Go ahead and figure this thing out and let me know if it's worth investing in, or I should say, putting more money in." And so that was really my foray into the restructuring world. Um, and so I did that really as a hired gun. As I said, I did it pretty much on my own. I mean, I haven't had a W-2 since I was in my 20s. But then I was fortunate enough to get into a large aviation company after 9/11. And it took me 6 years to get this business turned around. I had two divisions, and it was a wonderful outcome, an incredible outcome in South Florida. We saved about 900 jobs in the process. And today, I sold the business in '08, and today, the amount of employees at that company is doubled in South Florida. So that's I mean, that says it all, right? I mean, when you're able to do something like that, it's such a proud moment for myself, but also for the management team that I led, and most of whom are still there. But back to the naming, once I sold that business, I was sitting there saying, okay, now what do I do for the rest of my life? And I had a newborn. And so I said, you know what? I think what I want to do is I want to start my own practice, and I want to, and mind you, this is '08. So we were rolling into, I mean, Bear Stearns had just collapsed. We were going into the summer of '08, and it was really tough waters, but really didn't know how tough they were. But nevertheless, I decided to start my own advisory practice, and the name of it, ACM, is my daughter's initials, and so I thought that was appropriate because you, you never forget your purpose, right? When you've involved your child like that in your work. So it's been a wonderful ride, and I'm happy to say that I'm still here today, and we're still doing great things.
Excellent, because that is really quite the transformation story. And then I'm curious, again, just a little sidebar. Has your daughter shown interest in the business and working with you and supporting you? Because that's always a hot potato, right? Like, oh, I don't want to do what my parents did.
Well, that's a great question. It's funny because she's going into college and she's majoring in business, so we shall see.
Mm.
Um, and I didn't lead her to that. I didn't say anything to her. It's her own choice. The only thing I've ever said to her is follow your passion, whatever that might be. So we will see. But she, along the way, she's learned of stories. She's learned of incidences that occurred in her lifetime that were pretty monumental at the time. And so it's been fun to share some of those stories with her, and more importantly, to share the struggles within those companies and the ability to come through it. At least from the sidelines, she's understood perseverance in that regard.
And that's, I think, really the heart of this episode where I'd like to take it. Because we talk a lot about Gen X being the most resilient generation, right? We were the ones that grew up where mom went back to work, put a key around a shoestring around our necks, and said, go figure it out. Cook your mac and cheese when you get home, turn the stove off, and just make sure you come back when the lights are on, right?
That's right.
Essentially, feral children, right? Left to our own devices. Yet, Gen X collectively raised the least resilient generation, Gen Z. Now, again, it's not surprising that they are struggling given that they were essentially born as the Twin Towers fell, right, in Manhattan, and then the financial crisis and seeing Gen X. But I don't want to make this a generational story. What I want to make it about is how you need resilience as a small business owner, as an entrepreneur, because it's not all wow, like fantastic, like here's the big wad of cash, here we go. There's some parts to it that are not so easy. Let's talk about where your clients, again, would never name names, where
Mhm.
you've seen them run into trouble. What kinds of trouble happens?
Sure. I mean, I've seen every variety that you could imagine. I'll give you an example. I had a gentleman who became a client of mine in 2011, I think it was. He had started a very successful um, business that out of his garage, and built it and ultimately sold it. And he took home from that sale about 110 million.
Wow.
So a wonderful story, wonderful outcome. However, when he when he closed on the transaction, it was just a few years before '08, and consequently he proceeded to invest in other businesses, etc. Well, then, of course, '08 happened. He spent a lot of time in aviation at that time. Well, aviation was took it on the chin in a big way, and so he was in a bad way. And so he came to me with a lot of personal guaranteed debt, or a lot of debt that was personally guaranteed. I mean, he was in a bad way, and quite candidly, he didn't know how to get out of it, and for good reason. I mean, he was an entrepreneur. He didn't understand the world of finance that well, and so I had to hold his hand. And he was considerably older than I, but I held his hand and walked him through it, and we ultimately got the guarantee, which was about $17 million, and we got that guarantee reduced to 2 million. And that was the impetus for him to start a new business. at that time, which was 2012. Um, and now I will say that he then started a new business, and unfortunately, he made some of the same mistakes, and so I had to come back in about 6, 7 years later and kind of right the ship again. But the point being, a lot of my clients have been entrepreneurs. A lot of my clients have failed, and they have failed miserably, and they have failed often. And they are, I mean, I think they are the epitome of perseverance because of that. I mentioned the fact that I, haven't had a W-2 since my 20s. And so I admire people that are of similar ilk, that have done it themselves and not relied on anybody else, but have fought the fight and have been in the trenches, and really have figured out how to get through it. And I always tell people, look, if unless you've been up in the middle of the night trying to figure out how to meet payroll that week, don't tell me you've run a business, okay? Because that is that to me is where the rubber meets the road. That's where you've got to figure it out. That's where you're on your own. You're in the it's the middle of the night, and you're trying to figure out how the heck am I going to keep these employees employed and the lights on. And there's always a way, candidly, to figure it out. Most of the time. I'm sure there's industries. I mean, if you're in the copier business, that would have been a challenge. But most of the time you're able to figure it out. And the key is that perseverance. And I tell people also, look, you got to burn the boats. When you make a decision and you move on to whatever that decision is, and you bring your team with you, when you get to that island, you burn the boats. You do not give yourself a chance to retreat. You are going to fight through that island. You're going to fight whatever's in front of you, and you will succeed. And you will tell your team you will succeed because they're looking at you. And so, to me, perseverance is, sure, it's a science, but it's also an art. And I think people don't give themselves enough time to persevere at times. I think they will at times pull the plug, and run to a job. Let's say I've known many people that have done that. Just said I can't deal with this anymore, and they've gone and found a job in that industry, and they said, okay, now I found safe ground. Well, here's the thing. I had this discussion at dinner last night. I had met a gentleman from Ford Motor. Fortunate enough, he was a mentor of mine. Who he was the one that had taken the Ford Mustang to Europe in the '60s. And when I was contemplating taking a role in a business in Eastern Europe in the '90s, he said to me, Jim, there's no such thing as job security. So those people that go for the W-2s that think that
Right.
they're coming on solid ground or safer areas are mistaken. I would argue that probably the safest route is the route that you're already on, that you're controlling everything, right? So
That's it. This is it. Not to say that there aren't going to be market perturbations and all these kinds of things that you're going to have to overcome. Oh my God, like I said, I've pivoted so many times, I've just about lost track.
right,
But to your point about the JOB, there are new pressures now, AI, all of these sorts of things
right,
that are creating
right,
these redundancies with respect to talent. And so
right,
we've got to look at, well, what can we do? What can I do given my skill set and my interests?
right.
And you talk about again, like that perseverance. I mentor a lot of young entrepreneurs, and I've had two recently since the holidays where both of them have said, oh my God, I've been hustling for like 2 weeks and I don't have a freaking client yet. Like, I'm not sure. And I'm thinking, oh my God, 2 weeks? And I've said to both of them, you talk about being candid. I don't think entrepreneurship's right for you because if you're
Right,
burnt out and giving up after 2 weeks,
right.
there is no way in hell you're going to make it after 1 year or 2 years or 3 years if you're
No,
not fully aligned with your why and what you're doing it for.
that's exactly right. And you bring up the term aligned, and alignment is something that I mean, I learned it in business school many years ago, and it's one of the truest tests of a leader is to ensure that they're aligned with their employees, aligned with their constituents, be it their vendors, be it with their customers, be it with their lenders. The alignment of interest is so critical, particularly when you're in a tough situation. And I'll say this in that regard. Oftentimes, what I would come into are companies that were in distress and they had been hiding from the lender. They have been, withholding information from the lender. They're avoiding their calls, or they're telling me we'll get back to you, et cetera, et cetera. Well, what happens? Well, if it's a traditional lender, that they're getting nervous as all get out, and it does nobody any good when one does that. And so again, alignment of interests, it's across all constituents, and especially when you're in distress, the biggest constituent sometimes is that lender, and to make sure that you're in communication with that lender on a regular basis, and more importantly that you say, listen, I got this, we've got a plan, we're going to get out of this, this is how we're going to get out of it, but guess what, you're going to have to ride with us, so we're in this together, but we're going to do this together. And so I love the word alignment. I really do. And it's proven to be such a critical term and critical uh, uh, thing for businesses to and for owners to recognize how important that alignment is.
Oh, yeah, because it's on every aspect of the business, starting
Exactly.
with, is the business and the direction that it's going aligned with your personal passions and vision and dream?
Right.
Is it aligned with the people that you're surrounding yourself with who are
Right.
helping you achieve said dream or vision? And then
Exactly.
is it aligned with what the market wants, what it's willing to pay for,
Right.
all that sort of stuff? It is all of that. And as someone who has failed on, all three of those aspects, but learned,
Well, there
you
you
just
go.
you
That,
get
that's
up and
the
you
that's
figure it
the
out like,
important
no,
part, right? Is
yes, I'm going
yeah.
to keep going.
Yeah, I
Right?
know. I listen. I have been fortunate enough over the years to bring business professors in from my business school and others, well known business schools. But I've brought in professors at companies that I've stepped into, in companies that were in distress as well, and spent a day or two offsite with. And this professor would be a strategy professor, and we would together design the strategy. And it's not about where we were, right? It's about where we are and where we're going. And you get the buy-in. And again, oftentimes they'd say, well, I mean, how the hell are we going to keep our lights on? No, no, no. Listen, that's going to take care of itself. We got to figure out what the best strategy is, and you guys need to do that. And so that's proven to be a really effective tool. Not only do you get buy-in from everybody, but you then create that alignment. You align your strategy that's being created with all of those various constituents. And it's really it's served us well over the years. I've been doing that particular exercise on and off, but I've been doing it for 30 years, candidly. And I think it's just a great way to not only build rapport, but also to get buy-in from your key management team.
Oh, yeah, you get it. And then I think you've given us the answer, but what are those signs that a business is in distress? Is the first sign avoiding books and avoiding the reality?
Yeah, great question. I was in an automotive company in '08. Right after I sold the aviation company, I stepped into a tier two automotive supplier in the summer of '08. And these guys had done exceptionally well over the years, but they started to slide. And I said to the owner at the time, I said, you guys have to do a cash flow forecast, what we call in the business and industry 13-week cash flow forecast, which means, hey, for the next 13 weeks, what are our inflows and what are our outflows? And what does that look like? And once we did that exercise, and once I showed that, and I had a team with me, and once we showed that to the owner and his business partner, it was clear that the automotive industry was on a severe downturn. And put that in perspective, in '08, the beginning of the year, the North American the Automobile Association had forecasted 16 million vehicles being manufactured in '08. And so I'm saying to you, this was in the summer, this was June, if you will, of '08. And it was clear to me that we were in tough waters. And this is before Bear Stearns, and it was certainly before September's, complete, off the cliff. So we were a little ahead of the curve, if you will, of being able to then make changes and reduce staff and do some other things to reduce the cash burn during that period of time. But and I'm sorry, I'm kind of going around, but to answer your question, it's really when you're in distress, the most important thing you can do is understand what your cash flow is. Where are you going to be getting your cash from? What are your receivables? What do they look like? Are you getting stretched on your receivables? Do you feel like you're not going to be able to collect on those receivables? Is there a way to discount them? Or is there a way to offer discounts to your current customer base to get cash in the door as quickly as possible? So the various things that one encounters, there's a set I mean, there's effectively a toolbox that one has to go through and then help the team, the management team, and the owner maneuver through.
I want to pick apart the cart before the horse problem related to this. Hey, not if I don't look at my books, therefore, right? I don't know, therefore, there's no problem. Estimates range from SBA score and other groups anecdotally and surveys that have been formally conducted that somewhere between half and three quarters of all the 33 million small businesses in the USA don't do profit and loss statements. They don't do cash flow predictions. Do you think that if they did, they might not be in such dire straits financially?
Totally. I
Right?
mean, information is absolutely key. I don't care if you're doing it on a napkin. You must know where you are every day, and that's a great segue into another tool that I find absolutely critical, and that is we do in any company that I step into, and this has been going on honestly all of my career. We do a flash report every week, and we take the key inputs that are needed in that particular business. What are those key inputs? Be it production, whatever those are, and you measure those, but you measure them against your previous. Let's say it's retail, so you would say, okay, my sales this week versus my sales last week, but more importantly, my sales same week last year, right? So what are the trends? And transactions, if again in retail, let's pick a Burger King restaurant. What are the daily transactions? What are the average checks? All of those things are critical to understand every day, not just periodically, but every day. And so many people don't do that. So many people just miss that. And they wait till because let's face it, your financial statements are stale. you know, I mean, you're lucky if you're able to get your financials out 15, 20 days after the month. Excuse me. So by that point, the horses are out of the barn. So so without the interim reporting, that's the flash reports, the cash flow forecasts, those types of things, you may be, I mean, you may be out of luck, candidly.
It's definitely a problem. And you look at, again, also other stats, small businesses, two-thirds, according to SCORE, are currently operating on business loans.
Right.
So there's some real pressures out there that I know it. I see it as a mentor. I see it in my clients. I see it all over the place where I work with a lot of the small to micro businesses. And the pressure's real. People just don't know what to do. They don't know where to go. They're desperate for a loan just to kind of hang on a little bit longer. So, what do you advise people to do other than, hey, go take a look at your books and take an honest look at them? Beyond that, where should they look, Jim? Is there something they should be doing?
Well, I mean, it's a great question. There's in my view, you have a handful of different options. When to your point about the business loans, there, and I know you as part of that, we both know the cost of debt today is very expensive, right? So that exacerbates the those that are in distress in some form or fashion. So you've got that going on. Now, if they're in debt, if they have those business loans and they're operating, then one of the first things that I would do is I would go to the lender and say, look, we need a forbearance, meaning we need you guys to not do, we're not going to pay you interest and we're not going to pay you principal. We want you to defer for 18, or excuse me, for 90 days, 180 days, whatever that time period is. And but again, with that ask, you have to come to them with a plan that says, look, this is how we're going to get out of it. We're going to get out of this, right? I mean, you always got to come with complete confidence, and you say, look, we're going to get out of this, but we're going to need your help to do so. Now, you can say, oh, it's a big bad lender. I mean, pick a big bank. Pick Chase, pick whomever. Doesn't matter. But do you think they want to run your business? No. They they know, I mean, unless you have been saying that time and time again and not delivered, that's one thing. But if you come to them and say, listen, I need a deferral for a period of time, they're going to ride with you. They have to ride with you. I mean, they don't want to, unless they have, cash collateral. It's in their best interest, and it would behoove them to ride with you during that time period. So that's one piece that I think people may be afraid to do, because now part of that is reputation, right? They're in a small community. They're afraid to go to the local banker and say, hey, I don't think we're going to be able to make it without your help. And I get all of that. I mean, there's plenty of social issues that perhaps compound the problem. But what I tell clients is look at the lowest hanging fruit, right? And the lowest hanging fruit oftentimes is the lender. You've got let's say you've got a business loan and you're doing an amortization of 5 years. Every month you're making a payment, and you can't make those payments. And so, to me, that's the first thing you can do. And then, other things are, again, payroll and related type of things, um, are things that one needs to take a long, hard look at. I could go on and on with all these stories, but, oftentimes these entrepreneurs will bring in friends and they'll bring in certainly family. And I came across some right after the '08 crash, 9, 10 people that I knew well. And one guy in particular, he brought in his high school friend who had gone on and studied accounting, and he brought him in as his CFO. And so things were going tough. Things were going, I mean, it was really a challenging time period, obviously, given where we were in the country, but also in the particular industry that they were in. And I kept questioning him about this CFO, who I felt was quiet, um, reticent to provide timely information.
Hmm.
And I remember saying more than once, are you sure you know what he's doing? Are you sure that the controls are in place? And then as I dug into it, I realized no, the controls weren't in place. Your cash controls were not in place. This guy he was able to write the checks. He was able to create the vendors. He was able to do everything. Well, then when you peeled back, layers, you realized he had taken over $1 million from this client.
Ah,
So, and this was a friend of his from high school, and they were probably 10 years into the company by this point. So,
yes.
so that person had his own issues because it was '08, right? And so he had started taking money here and there, and next thing you know, you're up to $1 million or thereabouts. So, when you're in that situation, you got to look everywhere, and you got to make sure that you have the controls in place. Now ahead of time, hopefully, right?
Right.
Hopefully you're able to put controls in place particularly when you're starting out, or when the business is just about to get growing, you want to make sure everything is tidy. For that reason, you don't want to have. I mean, you bust your butt, you do all those things, and then you have somebody walking out the back door. It's a killer. It's an absolute killer.
Do you think that part of it is, I guess, really the psyche, the mindset, and the fear that the entrepreneur who's in financial trouble is experiencing, and so they tap a friend, a family, somebody just because it's so scary and they want to bring them in, they want that reassurance. And I think that maybe they get clouded by that show of support, and because they're not really looking for what's best, they just want support because it's so hard. Do you, said another way,
Hmm.
many times in my mentorship and even with my clients, I'm more of a therapist than I am a business strategist.
Right. Right.
Is it the same for you? Because I mean, the stakes
Yeah,
that you're playing at are
absolutely.
huge.
No, no, absolutely. I mean, I mean, I've had to talk some people off the ledge, for sure. I had a case where this was a third generation, and unfortunately, this third generation, um, the business was very successful, first and second. He was the third. When things were going great, he pulled a ton of money, ton of capital out of the business and spent it on, a big home, big, the boats, all that thing, all those things. And I remember going to their house when the bank was foreclosing on them, and the wife was literally selling chandeliers and other things that she was not supposed to be selling once they sold the house. They were attached. And she was selling them in order to keep cash for to keep her kids in private schools. So
Oof.
um, so people get desperate is the point. But they will bring in, oftentimes, cousins and other friends that are perhaps myopic, or perhaps are really not, they don't have their best interests at heart.
No. Or they're not, again, we talked about alignment at the beginning of the podcast.
Right.
They're not aligned with the skill set that's really needed,
That's
right?
right.
And maybe their intentions are pure or
Yes,
not, but they're not the right fit for what
that's
needs to be
exactly
done,
right.
right? You got to
Right.
cut out the friends and say, no more BS. This
No.
is where we are. This is the reality. What do we do next?
No, that's right. And you're spot on. You got to rip that Band-Aid and get rid of the people that are perhaps, yesing you to death, right? I mean, it's tough love. You need the tough love. And I mean, I've told people that, gosh, I was in a situation in 2000, where we had to take a company into bankruptcy in Ohio. And I'll never forget, it was 1,800 employees, and the business had been in existence since, well, for 125 years. 125 years. And we took
Mm.
it into bankruptcy. It had 1,800 employees. And we ended up effectively liquidating the company. And I remember, one of the women, that had worked there for many years, they had pensions and everything, all of it was pretty much wiped out. And she said to me, I'll never forget it. She said, if you were just here sooner, if they had called you sooner,
Yeah.
and so often that's the case, whether it be myself or anybody, people that know what they're doing. I mean, you can really just benefit so much, from that type of counsel and leadership. Um, and they, you tell them, don't be afraid to ask, don't be afraid to seek help. You don't have the answers, and you're not supposed to have the answers. This is not a world that you're familiar with.
So, Jim, where can folks find you or ACM Capital Partners, and what's sort of the minimum either annual revenues bogey that they should be, I guess, have as a business before they work with you? Because I'm imagining
Sure.
you work with a certain range of clients.
No, so, I mean, we've always worked in the lower middle market. So I would say that our client base, from a revenue standpoint, has ranged from 10 million to, about 500 million. But more towards I would say that the median is about, 80 to 100 million. right? But it's really for us, and particularly me now. You know, I will take on cases or clients that I feel have real potential, whether it is just 10 million or 15 million, and you feel like you're going to be able to make a real difference, and you're going to really be able to help a family or this business. So you know, it all depends. But I tell people, don't hesitate to reach out. You know, our website is ACM Capital Partners. Simple enough. And there you can reach out to us that way. Our, you know, you can dial us on the phone. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook. And my cell phone number, candidly, is I've given it out for 25 years. And I never, I always tell people, please feel free to call me. And I'll tell you right now, the cell is 305-978-0720. I will not, I mean, I'll always answer the phone, and I will listen. And if we can help you, we will.
I'm the same way. My cell phone is everywhere. And so if people, of course, here it is. I want to help, right?
That's it.
So, last question, signature question of the show.
Sure.
If we got to peek into your closet and there was a pair of footwear or maybe a clothing accessory that personified who you are, Jim Martin, what are we looking at and why is that your go-to and it represents everything you stand for?
That's a that's an interesting question. I don't want to say you've caught me flat-footed, but that is a great question. So I will tell you, my closet is very neat. That's the Virgo in me, the accountant in me. And I have clothing for all occasions. You know, we spend a lot of time in Colorado, still have a place in Miami, and so the closet contains clothing for every occasion and every weather pattern that's known to man. But it's a very neat closet, and so I like to have things orderly, which really speaks to what I have to do when I go into a company. Right? Is
You
really
are aligned.
that's right. That's exactly right. That's exactly
All
right.
right. With that, Jim Martin, founder of ACM Capital Partners, thank you so much for being on our show today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.